Hi everybody!
Recently, I read an article on rushdownradio.net, a site primarily centered around fighting games and RPGs, but that wasn't the focus of this article. The article put forth the idea that indie games are oversaturated as a market. This isn't a statement I particularly agree with. Sure, you're going to see far more indies releasing now than you will AAA games, but there's a reason for that. AAA games have to follow a strict corporate structure, so there's always going to be fewer of them in a given year, since AAA games have kind of taken on a blockbuster film-like quality. Oh, don't worry, I've covered that topic in a separate video, but AAA games are now more about spectacle than substance. You get a few gems, of course, but those are becoming fewer and fewer. In fact, most gamers are becoming a little gun-shy of supporting AAA titles because they're typically releasing in unfinished states. They're also less happy about the increasing asking price for games as a whole. That's to say nothing of the ever-increasing predatory actions of publishers adding in microtransactions. But that's beside the point. In the previously mentioned article, the author mentions there were only 181 AAA games released in 2023, compared to almost 14,000 indie games, which seems to be the basis for their argument. So let's break down why that's wrong. Okay, so 14,000 may seem like a lot of games, and it is, but keep this in mind, indie games have one huge advantage over AAA. That being diversity. AAA titles mostly adhere to whatever is the flavor of the month, and this trend lasts for years. In the 90s, the mascot platformer was the big thing. The 2000s saw the rise of the first-person shooter on consoles. The 2010s saw a mix of shooters, battle royales, and cinematic games. The battle royales have actually led to a lot of problematic things within AAA gaming at present. That's because the vast majority of them are free-to-play titles that make their money through battle passes, limited time skins, and other such underhanded tactics. Developers and publishers of these types of games are literally weaponizing the fear of missing out against their player bases. Admittedly, they're targeting weak-willed people who need help. Jesus Christ, I really am turning into the straight-edge promo-era CM Punk at this point.
Oops, I'm breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah, you absolutely are, man, and I'm telling you, I am cringing so hard, I may lose the teeth that I have at this point, because, oh my god! Yeah, this is, the life of an editor, people. You have to listen to cringe 24/7. So unless you're prepared to deal with that, never be an editor.
Thankfully, I'm not one of those weak-willed plebiscites. For any free-to-play game I actually spend any time with, I'm a free player. Admittedly, the only one I really give a fuck about is Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, and if you play your cards right and are smart, you can win as a free player. But no, indie games are not getting too many releases. That's like saying there are too many McDonald's just because there are fewer KFCs. They are two entirely different markets, and they cater to their audiences in two completely different ways. AAA games literally try to get as many individuals to buy the game as possible. They're targeting the normies and the casuals. Admittedly, the more casual gamer does drive the market. I'm under no illusion that a gamer like myself who prefers more focused and niche experiences is in the driver's seat when it comes to the industry. I'm just smart enough to realize when a generalization does not apply. In this situation, it doesn't. The reason there's more indies on the market compared to AAAs is because indies are literally catering to players who want different experiences, thus making the indie segment of gaming far more diverse. So why are indie games more diverse in their offerings? Again, it's because they're targeting a more niche demographic. Most indie developers aren't targeting the normies. They're targeting someone more like myself or my editor who want different experiences. Until the indie scene took up the mantle, Metroidvanias were basically a dead genre. I'll pass you over to TheMadBelmont, who also makes content around Metroidvanias, to explain why they were dead for so long and how indies revived them.
Thank you, Colin. So, the reason why Metroidvanias were so dead for so long is because, for one, Konami basically all but forgot about them after the last DS game came out, and then Nintendo, they might do something with Metroid once every other generation. So, yeah, you gotta consider that. The top 2 sources for this stuff stopped. And I guess some indie developers got tired of waiting for new Castlevania games that were in that style and waiting for new Metroid games that were in that style. So they basically just went and said, you know what? We're going to make games in this style just to kind of satiate the appetite that I know a lot of people have for this stuff. And we've gotten games like Dust and Elysian Tale. We've gotten games like a Hollow Knight, a Blasphemous, Salt and Sanctuary even. You've got games like freaking Guacamelee, and you've got games like, you see, you've got all these different indie games. Bloodstained even, which is a Castlevania spiritual successor. You've got all these different games that happen as a result of developers basically saying, okay, Konami, okay, Nintendo, if you're going to leave the money on the table for us, we're just going to snatch it. We're going to be the Joker, and we're just going to come in here, we're going to take it, and then we're going to burn the house down along with you. Okay? Because we're sick and tired of waiting, and we know that the customers are too, so here you go. And that is how the indie space has revitalized the Metroidvania, and it actually caused one of the big dogs to come out of retirement and say, you know what, there might be a market for this. And there is. And they recognized that. And they made Metroid Dread, Nintendo did. And it's amazing, and I love it. And we wouldn't have gotten that if it was not for this indie space and for these indie developers saying, hey, look, we get it, okay? We know you think that this isn't viable. We'll show you that it is so that you can go on ahead and do it. So, yeah, indie games can lead to AAA developers doing something within a certain space if it's done well enough and it sells well enough in the indie space.
Thanks for doing that, Editor Belmont. If you haven't already, consider giving him a sub. But indies don't just stop at Metroidvanias, though that genre is at risk of becoming oversaturated like that article stated. Indies can be anywhere from a roguelite, like Hades, or a mascot platformer similar to A Hat in Time, plus other things like Hi-Fi Rush or even Skullgirls. Also, if we're being real, we can pretty much thank Skullgirls for making rollback netcode a mandatory feature in fighting games. At this point, it really is the indie market that innovates, the AAA market iterates. But it's thanks to the indie and AA scene that video games aren't these dull, banal experiences like modern Hollywood. That's the thing people fail to realize. Big budget games and movies need to be diverse, even if they're trying to capitalize on what's hot at the minute. I'd argue AAA gaming was better back in the day because you could buy pretty much any type of game and everyone was being catered to when it came to what they liked getting big budget releases. Okay, so clearly there are more indies and they cater more to specific audiences. That's partially why there's more of them. There's also the fact it's incredibly easy for your average Joe to just buy a game engine in this day and age. There's also the fact console manufacturers have helped democratize game development. Beyond that, there's also free engines like Unity. This has allowed the masses to make their own games more easily. This has both been a great thing and a bad thing for the industry. It's great because passion projects like Eternights and A Hat in Time can be made, but it's also a bad thing as Life of Black Tiger or games that are obvious asset flips get released. But a friendlier landscape for independent developers is why we're starting to see more indie games. So this is something I've wanted to discuss for a while, but I've not really had a video where it was appropriate to do so. Are indie games and AA games better than AAA releases? That depends. You have to remember, AAA, just like indie, is more of an umbrella term. For things like more passion in the projects, interesting and new ideas, then indie developers are always going to do it better than AAA studios. But if you want a highly polished game that has mass appeal, then indie developers just can't compete. It's an apples to oranges comparison. It's okay to have preferences though. My gaming tastes are more in line with the non-AAA experiences. They offer what I'm looking for in a video game, which is typically interesting characters and more thought-provoking stories. There are exceptions, of course. For example, Persona 3 Reload is a AAA experience with very thought-provoking themes, specifically Memento Mori. If you're having a Memento Mori moment, hit the subscribe button. But as a whole, AAA games fear tackling tougher subjects. Beyond Atlas with the Persona games, the only others out there tend to be the cinematic games on offer from Sony, and those work to varying degrees of success. By and large though, I would say indie games offer a more satisfying experience, whether it be from a narrative or gameplay perspective. For the most part, 3D platformers are dead, but indie developers who grew up with those types of games are bringing them back, much like indies brought back Metroidvanias. If you think a genre is dead, chances are it's only dead in the AAA space. If you go hunting for more budgeted titles, you'll find what you're looking for. If you like indie or AAA games, hit the like button. So are indies oversaturated? Generally speaking, they aren't. There are just more independent studios out there, meaning far more output. The indie of today could be the next big developer of tomorrow. But what are your thoughts on this topic? Do you feel like there are too many indies on the market? Comment below. Thanks go out to my current channel members, R. Campbell and Dani Boy. If you'd like to help the channel further, you can do so by hitting the join button or the link in the description. Now check out my video on why cinematic games are boring. Until next time, keep blazing that trail.